Ravensdene Court. Remained fine, and for the time of year warm, and I took advantage of it by dawdling along that glorious stretch of sea-coast, taking in to the full its rich stores of romantic scenery and suggestion of long-past ages. Sometimes I sat for a long time, smoking my pipe on the edge of the headlands, staring at the blue of the water, the curl of the waves on the brown sands, conscious most of the compelling silence, and only dimly aware of the calling of the seabirds on the cliffs. Altogether, the afternoon was drawing to its close, when, rounding a bluff that had been in view before me for some time, I came in sight of what I felt sure to be Ravensdene Court, a grey-walled, stone-roofed Tudor mansion that stood at the head of a narrow valley or ravine. Dean, they call it in these parts, though a dean is really a tract of sand, while these breaks in the land are green and thickly treed, through which a narrow, rock-encumbered stream ran murmuring to the sea. Very picturesque in its old-worldness it looked in the mellowing light. The very place, I thought, which a bookman and an antiquary, such as I had heard the late owner to be, would delight to store with his collections. A path that led inland from the edge of the cliffs took me after a few minutes' walking to a rustic gate which was set in the boundary wall of a small park. Within the wall rose a belt of trees, mostly oak and beech, their trunks obscured by a thick undergrowth. Passing through this, I came out on the park itself, at a point where, on a well-kept green, a girl, whom I immediately took to be the niece, recently released from the schoolroom, of whom Mr. Raven had spoken in his letter, was studying. Behind her, carrying her bag of sticks, stood a small boy, chiefly remarkable for his large boots and huge tam-o'-shanter bonnet, who, as I appeared on the scene, was intently watching his young mistress's putter, wavering uncertainly in her slender hands before she ventured on what was evidently a critical stroke. But before the stroke was made, the girl caught sight of me, paused, seemed to remember something, and then, swinging her club, came lightly in my direction. A tallish, elastic-limbed girl, not exactly pretty, but full of attraction because of her clear eyes, healthy skin, and general atmosphere of life and vivacity. Recently released from the schoolroom though she might be, she showed neither embarrassment nor shyness on meeting a stranger. Her hand went out to me with ready frankness. "Mr. Middlebrook?" she said inquiringly. "Mr. Middlebrook?" she said inquiringly. "Yes, of course. I might have known you'd come along the cliffs. Your luggage came this morning, and we got your message. But you must be tired after all those miles. I'll take you up to the house and give you some tea." "I'm not at all tired, thank you," I answered. "I came along very leisurely, enjoying the walk. Don't let me take you from your game." "Oh, that's all right," she said carelessly, throwing her putter to the boy. "I've had quite enough. Besides, it's getting towards dusk, and once the sun sets it's soon dark in these regions. You've never seen Ravensdene Court before?" "Never," I replied, glancing at the house, which stood some 200 or 300 yards before us. "It seems to be a very romantically situated, picturesque old place. I suppose you know all its nooks and corners?" She gave her shoulders, squarely, a little shrug, and shook her head. "No, I don't," she answered. "I never saw it before last month. It's all that you say, picturesque and romantic enough. And queer. I believe it's haunted." "That adds to its charm," I remarked with a laugh. "I hope I shall have the pleasure of seeing the ghost." "I don't," she said. "That is, I hope I shan't. The house is odd enough without that. But you wouldn't be afraid?" "Would you?" I asked, looking more closely at her. "I don't know," she replied. "You'll understand more when you see the place. There's a very odd atmosphere about it. I think something must have happened there some time. I'm not a coward, but really, after the daylight's gone—" "You're adding to its charms," I interrupted. Everything sounds delightful." She looked at me half inquiringly, and then smiled a little. "I'm pulling my leg," she said. "However, we'll see. But you don't look as if you would be afraid, and you're not a bit like what I thought you'd be either." "What did you think I should be?" I asked, amused at her candour. "Oh, I don't know. A queer, snuffy, bald-pated old man, like Mr. Cazalet," she replied. "Booky and papery and that sort of thing. And you're quite something else, and young." "The frost of 30 winters have settled on me," I remarked with mock seriousness. "They must have been black frosts, then," she retorted. "No, you're a surprise. I'm sure Uncle Francis is expecting a venerable, dry-as-dust sort of man." "I hope he won't be disappointed," I said. "But I never told him I was dry as dust, or snuffy, or bald." "It's your reputation," she said quickly. "People don't expect to find such learning in ordinary young men in tweed suits." "Am I an ordinary young man, then?" I demanded. "Really?" "Oh, well, you know what I mean," she said hastily. "You can call me a very ordinary young woman if you like." "I shall do nothing of the sort," said I. "I have a habit of always calling things by their right names, and I can see already that you are very far from being an ordinary young woman." "So you begin by paying me compliments," she retorted with a laugh. "Very well, I've no objection, which shows that I'm human anyhow. But here is my uncle." I had already seen Mr. Francis Raven advancing to meet us, a tall, somewhat stooping man with all the marks of the Anglo-Indian about him, a kindly face burnt brown by the equatorial suns, old-fashioned grizzled moustache and whiskers, the sort of man that I had seen more than once at Tilbury and Southampton, looking as if England, seen again after many years of absence, were a strange country to their rather weary, wondering eyes. He came up with outstretched hands. I saw at once that he was a man of shy, nervous temperament. "Welcome to Ravensdene Court, Mr. Middlebrook," he exclaimed in quick, almost deprecating fashion. "A very dull and out-of-the-way place to which to bring one used to London. But we'll do our best. You've had a convoy across the park, I see," he added with a glance at his niece. "That's right." "As charming a one as her surroundings are delightful, Mr. Raven," I said, assuming an intentionally old-fashioned manner. "If I am treated with the same consideration I have already received, I shall be loath to bring my task to an end." "Mr. Middlebrook is a bit of a tease, Uncle Francis," said my guide. "I've found that out already. He's not the paper and parchment person you expected." "Oh, dear me, I didn't expect anything of the sort," protested Mr. Raven. He looked from his niece to me and laughed, shaking his head. "These modern young ladies! Ah!" he exclaimed. "But come, I'll show Mr. Middlebrook his rooms." He led the way into the house and up the great stair of the hall to a couple of apartments which overlooked the park. I had a general sense of big spaces, ancient things, mysterious nooks and corners. My own rooms, a bedchamber and a parlour, were delightful. My host was almost painfully anxious to assure himself that I had everything in them that I was likely to want, and fussed about from one room to the other, seeing to details that I should never have thought of. "You'll be able," he said at last, as he made for the door. "We dine at 7. Perhaps there'll be time to take a little look round before then, after we've dressed. And I must introduce Mr. Cazalet. You don't know him personally? Oh, a remarkable man, a very remarkable man indeed, yes." I did not waste much time over my toilet, nor, apparently, did Miss Marcia Raven, for I found her in a smart gown in the hall when I went down at 6:30. And she and I had taken a look at its multifarious objects before Mr. Raven appeared on the scene, followed by Mr. Cazalet. One glance at this gentleman assured me that our host had been quite right when he spoke of him as remarkable. He was not merely remarkable, but so extraordinary in outward appearance that I felt it difficult to keep my eyes off him.